correct? All right, let's do it. Yep. Okay. What's up, Dolphins fans? Chris Perkins, your Sun Sentinel Dolphins columnist, alongside my boy David Furones, your Sun Sentinel beat writer. And hey, Dolphins bye week, but your Miami Dolphins in first place in the AFC East, 7-3 record, a half game ahead of Buffalo. Tua remains on fire for the third consecutive week. He's racking up the best passer ratings of his career. The Dolphins' second week of seeing Bradley Chubb and Jeff Wilson, both of those acquisitions pay off big time in last week's 49-17 victory over Cleveland. Offense, best scoring total of the season against the Browns. Defense held one of the league's top running backs, Nick Chubb, to just 63 yards. The defense also produces a turnover. Special teams, okay, there needs to be a little bit of work there. Jason Sanders, he's an even bigger question after 2 missed extra points, but the arrow is pointed upward now more than ever all season long for the Miami Dolphins. A lot to talk about today. Let's dive in. So, David Furones, let me ask you something here. The Dolphins now at 7-3. I don't know how many people predicted 7-3. I don't know how many would have predicted first place in the AFC East at the bye. But do we now readjust the Dolphins' season expectations? You know I have, because I predicted them to win 8 games. Yeah. Do you trust Buffalo to be stronger than the Dolphins? What are you seeing as the season enters its second half, or for the Dolphins, the post-bye gets going here?
Well, Perk, I don't have to adjust much because I kind of predicted they would be around here at this point in time. Unlike you, which I think, yeah, you do have to make some major adjustments to your season prediction at 8-9 because they're already about to hit the 8 wins as we speak right here on the other side of the bye. So, but I still see it overall as it is a difficult stretch coming down the final stretch, that final month plus when you go into that West Coast swing and then at Buffalo. So preseason, I did predict 10-7, and that would be good enough for a wild card berth. Maybe a slight adjustment now that I'm seeing it, that maybe 11 wins. That still is a very challenging stretch again at the end, but. Yeah, I think I kind of predicted that around this point the team would catch fire in this part of the schedule. Now, I maybe had a circuitous route to 3-3. They didn't really get there the way I thought they would early on. I was thinking maybe those first 4 would start 1-3 with how challenging that was, and I didn't know Minnesota would be as strong as it is. The Jets would be as strong as they are. So I kind of maybe had a different route to get them to 3-3 and then have this win streak going on at this point in the season. So against teams that they should handle, they have done it, so give them credit for that. So now they are ahead of Buffalo, first place, sole possession in the AFC East. Now they do have an extra game played than those other teams, Buffalo and the Jets. So now they'll have a chance to get back into it. End of the season now, that December 18th or 17th, it could be a Saturday game. That game at Buffalo will make huge determinations on whether the Dolphins can indeed take the Bills in the AFC East. So right now, I'll stick to what I had in that they're still going to be a very strong wild card team, but it is tempting to now believe, and I think fans can believe if they want to. Yes, this team is getting a lot closer to Buffalo after we've seen the recent, also not only Dolphins success, but also Bills failures in recent weeks. So definitely getting closer, and that game later on against Buffalo is going to be very interesting. See if the Dolphins can sweep the series.
Yeah, and look, and later on we're going to get into whether this Dolphins team could win a road playoff game in a cold locale. But really, look, Furones, these guys ought, and we can say this, these guys ought to be a lock for 8-3, right? They get Houston next week. Houston is terrible, 1-7-1. And when the Dolphins get to 8-3, they're a, you hate to say a lot, but they're a lot for a wild card at that point, right? I mean, you hate to say never, but they can't miss. At 8-3, I would hate to think that they could miss the wild card, because this team seems to be built in a way that, and we talked about this, and I've said this, they can win in numerous ways. You know, offense, defense. We'll see what the run game can do for them, but big play, just kind of a steady fashion of winning by producing turnovers, which we saw late in the Pittsburgh game. So, you know, this team last week was the closest that they came to that complete game. If not for the special teams miscues, it would have been the complete game. But that's okay. I think that they are really building toward the point where, you know, they're getting so much confidence in how they can win, whether it's offense or defense or strong run game, big game from the passing, some turnovers from the defense. We'll see if the defense can continue its good run defense. I think that they will. They're probably kind of over the hump when you talk about facing those tough teams with the tough run games, although Houston is coming up, and that'll be the last one in this particular stretch for the quote-unquote soft part of the schedule. But at 8-3, they're a lock for a wild card, aren't they? You know, no guarantees in life, but they should be.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we're already making our Dolphins-Texans predictions, but yes, I will be picking the Dolphins to win at home coming off the bye against the Houston Texans, who would enter at or are now 1-7-1. And then are they a lock at 8-3? Listen, you want to say so, but I mean, I also grew up in Miami watching some of the early 2000s teams, and yeah, a lot of Dolphins teams in the past have started hot. Obviously, it's always a big advantage at home when you get the warm weather, and then sometimes going into the cold weather late in the year. I'm thinking about like 02 and 03 teams that did finish above 500 but kind of tailed off at the end. So I don't want to call it a guarantee. I mean, I remember the 02 team losing at Minnesota and at the Patriots the final 2 weeks, and that was devastating to miss the playoffs after where that team stood earlier in the season. So it's never a guarantee. 8 wins. It only clinches the record that you had at the beginning, 8-9. But I don't think the Dolphins are going to be losing the remainder of the games. They look very strong. So I would say a high percentage. I mean, like more than 3/4, in the 80s, almost 90%, that you make the playoffs once you start 8-3. But you got to get it done too on the field.
Right. No guarantees, but yeah, they will be close to a guarantee, I would think. And you know, look, let's go out to our first Twitter question right now, Furones, and it comes from Enabled Swing, and the question is: if Byron Jones comes back, we're Super Bowl favorites. Don't try to convince me otherwise. And actually, that's not a question. That's a statement. Right, that's a statement. But if Byron Jones comes back, this defense gets a huge boost, Furones, and you can go back to the style that you had last season of just shutting down receivers, and you won't have Brandon Jones or Nick Needham, but you're more free to go back to that style. Plus, with the addition of Bradley Chubb, I would think that adds a different dimension if Byron Jones comes back. I wouldn't say Super Bowl favorites, but if Byron Jones comes back, I would think the Dolphins get even higher on that hierarchy of the AFC favorites. Not Super Bowl favorites, but AFC favorites. Maybe they move a lot closer to Buffalo and Kansas City, maybe even alongside Buffalo and Kansas City. I wouldn't say Super Bowl favorites, but if Byron Jones comes back, where are the Dolphins as far as projections?
Yeah, why not? No, well, they wouldn't be Super Bowl favorites, but as far as betting favorites, what the public perception would be, but I think you're right. They'd be up there. They'd be closer. And it also depends on which Byron Jones you get now. I mean, he's coming back from a long time away, a long recovery from that lower left leg surgery all the way back in March. So it has been a long time for him. He hasn't even returned to practice. Actually, that would have been a good thing to ask Mike McDaniel on this side of the bye, but it kind of has felt like that's just the way it's going, that we're going to get the same answer, because I think us in the media have also felt a little bit of fatigue from asking every week. And so maybe on the other side of the bye, we revisit and find out if there's any more progress to report. But he has to begin practicing first, and then maybe you give him at least 2, maybe a third week to really get back in there. So you start counting backwards from the end of the season. And, we've talked about this in the media workroom, that now you're really cutting down on the window where he could really come back. But if you are able to get him back for maybe a few of the last regular season games and get him back into a rhythm, and he stays healthy, just gradually progresses, then maybe by playoff time you do get him to a point where he is something like the Byron Jones we've seen, that can complement Xavier Howard, playing opposite him, and really just each one locking down their side, especially as X now maybe is putting his groin injuries that had limited him earlier in the season. If he puts those behind him, then if you get something close to that cornerback tandem that we've seen that allows Josh Boyer to be as aggressive defensively as he wants to be, sending extra rushers, and especially now that this defense has granted minus Emmanuel Ogbah now, but has so many edge rushers with the addition of Bradley Chubb already to what you had with Jalen Phillips, Melvin Ingram, Andrew Van Ginkel, et cetera, then yeah, I mean, that defense can really get freed up to do a lot of things that Boyer likes to do. So there's layers upon layers of the impact that it would have if you get Byron Jones back, and if you get him back to something close to what he already was in the past. Not to mention, you've been developing other corners like Kader Koh, who has come along so much. So now having him in the fold as well. And granted, you won't have Nick Needham anymore. He's out for the season. Brandon Jones, strong safety. So your defense has been hurt in other places, but that would be a huge boost if it is able to develop that way.
Yeah, it would be. But like you say, we would have to see which Byron Jones we get initially, and then what he could be by the time the season is over in Phoenix. See what I did there in Phoenix? See what I did?
Oh.
See what I did?
Oh.
Look. So now that we're talking about adjusting or readjusting things, Furones, should we expect the Dolphins? And gosh, I hate to just look over this Houston game, but I'm going to do it. Players can't do it.
It's the bye week. You can focus on Houston next week when you're on with Dave Hyde.
Right. That's right. Exactly. We're looking ahead here. So, okay. So this 3-game road swing, they're at San Francisco, at the Chargers, at Buffalo. Now, do you expect them to win 2 of these? I think you could hope, but I'm saying expect. You could always hope. Can you expect them to win 2 out of 3 of these games the way that they've been playing recently?
I'd say the expectation is a tough road swing like that is that you can get 1 out of those 3. 2 out of 3 would be a bonus. Obviously, it's a failure if you lose all 3. Now, they are all 3 challenging games, and maybe depending on different factors, who knows what the odds will say. They might end up being underdogs in each one of these. These are road games, long travel. The Dolphins do stay on the West Coast in between, so at least they're kind of adjusted to the Pacific time by the time the LA Chargers game comes along in SoFi Stadium. So that's a smart move by the Dolphins organization to stay out in California for that week. But these are 3 strong opponents, and again, Buffalo, that could be we don't know when they're going to schedule it. Could be a Saturday, a lot of things to play. Either Sunday night, could be a very cold game out there, and could be even colder with the night setting. And it's always just tough to play in Buffalo regardless, especially for a Southern team that really still isn't getting adjusted to cold weather because, well, I mean, it's still, like 80 degrees outside here? I mean, on the Cleveland sideline, it was documented on the CBS broadcast that it felt like over 100 at Hard Rock Stadium. We're in mid-November. So, and also the Dolphins lucked out in Chicago where temperatures were around 60 as opposed to it could have been easily in the 30s at this time of year. Over there, Detroit, it's a dome. So, Dolphins haven't gotten adjusted to that. So that's something I'm still looking out for. But, yeah, I would say expectation, 1 out of 2, or 1 and 2, then you're fine. 2 and 1 in those 3, then you're dandy. You're looking great. And obviously, if you win all 3, then I mean now we're really talking like Super Bowl favorites and all this talk. So that's what I'd be looking at for that stretch. So make sure you get the Houston game on the other side of the bye, so you stand at 8-3 before that difficult stretch.
Right. Now, I would say right now, because it's the road and because you have three tough opponents there. I wouldn't expect that they win 2 out of the 3, but I think the hopes are a lot better than they were even a few weeks ago. And our last expectation kind of question or thing here, Furones, do you expect, if the Dolphins make the playoffs, that they win a first-round playoff game? Are they at that stage? If you know what, I'll say this: if they go in with 12 wins, definitely. 11 wins, probably. 10 wins, we'll see. But I would say this, at this stage, from what I've seen from this team, if they go in with 11 wins, yeah, I'm expecting them to win a first-round playoff game. And we'll have to see, location and health and all that kind of stuff, opponent. But, this team is again, it's versatile. And it's obviously it's shown me a lot more than I expected from them at the beginning of the year. But they continue to get better. Tua is getting better. The running game is getting better. Hopefully the defense finds more solid footing, but it can still, produce some turnovers and find ways to play well enough to win. 11 wins. I'm expecting a first-round playoff victory. 10, we'll see. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Where are you at with that?
I think a lot of it depends on these other factors. So, if they can overtake Buffalo in the AFC East and then you win the division and now you're playing a home game in January, then, I really like the Dolphins' chances. If they end up as a wild card team, which they can end up with a very strong record, and then Buffalo also just goes back to playing the way we expect Buffalo to be as the preseason Super Bowl favorites, and then maybe it's still not good enough to win the division. Now you're guaranteed that you are playing on the road because you're either going to be 5, 6, or 7, even if you're better than, say, 2 of the division winners as far as record goes. So you will be going on the road in that case, and then most likely once you go on the road, you're going into a cold environment. So then that plays a factor as well. So that's a big thing that I'm looking at as in regards to whether they can win an AFC playoff game. So that's the kind of the difficult thing, because they might end up really being, by record, the 3rd best team in the AFC, let's say, if they finish behind Buffalo and Kansas City. But you start as a top wild card and then you end up on the road. Granted, that would be the lowest division winner. So there's a little bit of a benefit there, but could very well be a difficult, cold environment that you go into.
All right, and as we wrap this segment up, let me ask you this. Where are you as far as the cold weather and the Dolphins, and we're really talking about the offense and the passing game? The more I see this team, I think the weather is less of a factor. I've always been an opponent guy that, you can't really say, well, if you go to Buffalo, it's the Bills. It's not necessarily the weather. If you go to Kansas City, it's the talent of the Chiefs and Pat Mahomes, not necessarily the cold weather. So I think that this offense will be okay in the cold weather. It's not an offense that relies on 40, 50-yard passes down the field. I think Tua's arm is strong enough to cut through wind for 20-yard passes, 15-yard passes. You'll get some yards after catch from Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. So I think the offense will be good in cold conditions. I think Tua will be fine. I think he'll be able to grip the ball. Tyreek has played in Kansas City. He's used to the cold. So I don't think it'll be a determining factor. If there's wind, that's different. But just cold weather, I think they're okay. You?
Right. If it's just cold, sure. And also, now that you have this running game and you have the physical aspect that Jeff Wilson brings, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later, then that definitely helps. So, I don't want to make too big a deal of whether this team can go outdoors and win in January. But, it is historically a factor that you have to consider when thinking about the Miami Dolphins, and that they haven't really played in yet. There were winds was a factor in the Chicago game, even though it wasn't that cold. So you like the way Tua Tagovailoa played in that game for sure. So if that's any indicator, then he's definitely set. And we've documented it, how we feel we've seen a stronger arm strength from Tua, him able to get the ball out there with more zip. If you're talking about maybe if it's at Baltimore, at Cincinnati, or at Tennessee, then those aren't like it's not like playing in Lambeau Field in the frozen tundra either. But yeah, it will be something that the Dolphins also will by then have seen at Buffalo and played in New England on New Year's Day. So at least by that point, then you've seen the cold a couple of times and maybe better suited for it once you've seen it a few times and experienced it.
Yeah. By the way, the Buffalo-Cleveland game this weekend, there's a chance of snow up in Buffalo, all up there. So as we're basking in our 80-degree weather, we can think of them and the conditions that are going to be awaiting the Dolphins most likely when they go up there to Buffalo. All right, so let's move on to segment 2, and we're going to talk Tua, because the dude is absolutely on fire. I mean, the last 3 weeks, we've seen him post these career best passer ratings: 138.7 against Chicago, 135.7 against Detroit, 135 against Cleveland, 9 touchdowns, no interceptions. Decision-making has been absolutely excellent, whether you're talking about throwing the ball or, whether he should slide, and sliding hasn't even really been a factor because the pass protection has been so good and receivers have been getting open. But Furones, to me, this is the first time that we've seen the tank for Tua for an extended period in 2+ seasons. And this is Tua making people around him better and people around him giving him time and opportunity to make them better. It's like the perfect marriage of all these conditions. And you've got Mike McDaniel and the Mike McDaniel offense, and everything seems to be working here. What have you thought about this version of Tua, and is this like the Tua that you expected to see at this stage of this season?
Yeah, it's funny because everyone would always mention, this offense might be quarterback proof enough going into the year, or Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they get open so easily that it's going to make things easier for Tua. What if, it's just a possibility, just throwing this out there, what if all three can be true at the same time? That Tua Tagovailoa is playing great at the quarterback position, that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are great at creating separation and getting open for him, and that the Mike McDaniel offense is also great with all the motions and the run game, the wide zone, pulling guards, and all the different formations and different plays, et cetera, that you can run out of different formations. What if all these factors are just a marriage in itself that are just all together? We're seeing it right now. It's just all together great. We're seeing the best Tua Tagovailoa, and sure, everything else, the Mike McDaniel offense, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle getting open as easily as they do helps him. But what if it's also true that he is just playing phenomenal football right now? He's seeing the field tremendously. You mentioned the 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions over the past 3 games. It's very consistent. We're seeing the efficient Tua that we've always seen with the accuracy and decision-making that sometimes would falter, maybe like once or twice a game in the past. Now he's almost playing perfect football. We're not even seeing those near interceptions that everyone wanted to point to in the Pittsburgh game. He shook the rust off from the games he missed from concussion, and now he's been really almost perfect. 3 straight games of quarterback rating over 135, which is astronomical. And, I mean, he leads in passer rating in so many different specific categories. Overall passer rating, third down passer rating. He's been at his best on the critical down to extend drives. Fourth quarter passer rating. So we've seen him in some shootouts. Detroit had to come back. Chicago, that one they built a lead and then kind of held on at the end, but still he's efficient there in the red zone. And the one that everyone always wants to get at him for, yards per attempt. Yep. So he's not just dinking and dunking, and he is driving the ball down the field. We're seeing a lot of the 20 yards down the field, occasional deep balls, and it's all working just beautifully right now.
Yeah, and let's go out to Twitter here. And again, we always appreciate when you guys respond to the Twitter inquiries and you guys come through with the questions. We appreciate that. This one comes to us from Catholic Ed for All. And the question is, which player has had more of an impact on Tua's success, Tyreek or Teron? This is a very good question, and I don't think you can answer it because to me, like you said, and like we were saying, I think Tua's success has been a marriage of a lot of factors. Now, look, Tua's at the top of the pyramid, right? Because of his talent and his skill, his ability to overcome critics, overcome injury, everything that he's had to overcome since he's been in the NFL, hasn't always had the support of the team. And if you want to say the owner or the coach or whatever, but Tua is at the top of the pyramid. Mike McDaniel also very high at the top of the pyramid. We'll put Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator, there. But the Tyreek Teron thing, I don't know if you can really separate it. Tyreek as a receiver, look, this guy, if he keeps doing what he's doing, he's hit it for Canton. I mean, he is absolutely incredible. And then Teron, I've talked about, and we've talked about in the media room, just what this guy has done, what he did with Myles Garrett from Cleveland and keeping him off of Tua, what he did with Alex Highsmith from Chicago, Aiden Hutchinson from Detroit, Von Miller from Buffalo, Justin Houston from Baltimore. So, man, it's really, really hard to separate. I hate to say I don't have an. I'll say Tyreek. But man, it's really, really, really close because of what both of those guys do just filters out to so many other areas of the team. And the same thing is true for Tua, but I'm going to go with Tyreek by maybe that much. Your thoughts?
I would go with Tyreek as well, and also feel like it's very close. There's so many reasons you can go to either one of them, but I'd give a slight edge to Tyreek because, as we've mentioned, I mean, we've called Tyreek Hill on this program the team MVP through the first half of the season, and now with the way Tua is playing on his own, I mean, he's probably just since he's the quarterback, he's put himself even higher in that conversation, and probably league-wide would maybe get more votes. But what Tyreek Hill is doing this season is astronomical. It's historic. Has been on pace to get to 2,000 yards. I'm not sure if he still is on pace after he only had 44 yards this game, which is so far below what he has just done regularly this season. But still, he can get right back on track to that and still break a receiving record this year. And if he does become the first 2,000-yard receiver in NFL history in a season, then, you have to give the nod to him. And there's so many reasons why you could say Terron Armstead as well, because it's not just what he does at left tackle. And we're also seeing how much they run to the left side and how big he is in the run game, where he can almost be like this Dolphins team version of Trent Williams in San Francisco that Mike McDaniel had for him with all those effective ground games there, but also protecting on the left side. I know it's not Tua's blind side, but still, it's just also the way he brings along that young O-line around him as the leader of the unit. And so to have him, his presence has, we've really seen it just permeate through that line, all those young blockers developing. And I know we haven't had Austin Jackson out there for a while. We haven't been able to see him because he's been injured. Liam Eichenberg is injured now, but then you sign a Brandon Shell off the street, off the practice squad a few weeks, gets in there, and he's played lights out at right tackle. Robert Jones, who was an undrafted rookie last year, got one start last year, and now he's come in for Eichenberg at left guard, and you've really seen the benefits of his development. So a lot of the credit of all of that goes to Terron Armstead and the foundation that he's built.
And let's talk about this with Tua and this offense also. What we saw last week, Furones, if I'm not mistaken, I think Tyreek and Jalen combined for 9 touches, right? 5 receptions and 4 receptions. These dudes score 49 freaking points, Furones. I mean, how in the world? Yeah, I mean, I really didn't expect that from this offense. And, you've got Trent Sherfield scoring a touchdown and Alec Ingold. And, of course, we saw that that Tyreek had a touchdown, but perfectly thrown pass. What's for this offense aside from Tua? I wouldn't have 9 touches for those two guys. You could win, but 49 points? No way I would have expected that. And we know, Jeff Wilson and offensive line, but aside from Tua, why do you think they're able to score 49 points with such minimal statistical contributions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and for so long we were saying, Tyreek Hill would be ahead of Tua as far as team MVP because Granted, Jalen Waddle's also right up there with him statistically, but because of how much of the passing game goes through Tyreek Hill and also how much he opens up for others. But then we see it in this game, how Tua was able to spread the ball around. I mean, who would have thought Alec Ingold would have one fewer target than Jalen Waddle and just two fewer targets than Tyreek Hill? So, I mean, look, I got the stat sheet in front of me. Tyreek Hill, 5 receptions for 44 yards. Jalen Waddle, 4 for 66. Trent Sherfield goes 4 for 63, and also a touchdown like Hill had. Ingold, 4 for 45 and a touchdown. Mostert getting in there with 4 receptions. Gesicki had 2 for 31. So it's just to have a game where you get the ball out to all your talented players. Jeff Wilson also getting involved in the passing game, which we've seen in both games that he's been in Miami. And that says a lot about Tua. And, so in instances where the opposing defense is really keying in on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, because you always say, well, you can't – if you double one, you can't double the other. And then if you try to double each, then you're really in trouble leaving someone wide open. But Tua identifying things that the defense shows. And then we saw it that back-to-back in the close to the end of the first half, when he had a 3rd and 6, he completed a 7-yard out, perfectly thrown ball to Jalen Waddle. A lot of people say, okay, maybe it's just a short out, but that's a throw where it shows you need that arm strength. You need to put it in the perfect spot because it could easily go for a pick 6 the other way if you are just a little bit off to the left, a little bit short, or throw it with just a little bit less force than he needs to get to that spot. Because that corner, if he jumps on it, then he's got no one in front of him to go the other way. And needing to convert it, he threw the perfect ball to Jalen Waddle to keep the drive going. And then 2 plays later, his next pass attempt, he throws an absolute dime in the corner of the end zone to Trent Sherfield, who comes down with a beautiful toe tap. So you're just seeing it right now. There's Tua hitting on all cylinders and making the throws, the timely throws, perfect spots, perfect ball placement. And now we see him spread the ball around as well, which is a huge plus.
Yeah, and I believe we heard Mike McDaniel talking about how Tua is able to go through his progressions so quickly and read the defense so quickly and really analyze what's going on out there in a split second. So, obviously Tua has changed my opinion and opened my eyes. And so, congrats to the guy, man. He is playing lights out. Congrats to Tua. All right, Furones, let's talk about the Jeff Wilson and Bradley Chubb additions to this team, because those two, I mean, there's really almost nothing but good news to talk about with the Dolphins at this point. And look, when you look at what these guys did in their second game with the Dolphins last week in that 49-17 victory against Cleveland, Jeff Wilson, 119 yards rushing, the physical presence. And when you talk to guys about Jeff, whether it's teammates or coaches, the one word that comes up is energy. And this dude brings it. I mean, whether he's blocking, whether he's catching, whether he's running the ball, whether he's just in the locker room because he's got that big smile and he's got that scooter and, he's just a lot of fun. He really is. And then Bradley Chubb, he has the 3 tackles, the half sack, putting constant pressure on Jacoby Brissett last week. And he talked about how his first week, it was just such a whirlwind. You're involved in the trade and you don't know your new teammates. You're trying to get your living situation settled. And then you're back on the road at Chicago. And he was saying that this week, he's getting to know teammates a little bit more. He and Jalen Phillips after the game, they did their sack dance for us in the locker room, the sack dance that they did on the field, said they were just talking about it before the game. But, and with Ogbah going out with the triceps injury, the Chubb addition is even more timely. What do you think about these additions? I mean, credit to the front office. And I've said that I love these additions together because of what they do for this team on both sides of the ball. Just one of them, okay. But together, incredible. I love these as a package deal, even though they weren't, a package, 2 separate trades. But what do these additions say about the players and what do they bring to the team, do you think?
Well, Perk, I differ in opinion on you there because I like both of them, whether it's individually, as a package, whatever. I like both additions. And also great work. You mentioned the what you've written about these acquisitions. Great work on that column after the game. Everyone go read that, sunsentinel.com, on the Jeff Wilson and Bradley Chubb acquisitions and the impact that they're already having. I mean, when you start with Jeff Wilson, the physical presence that he has brought to the run game, because that was something that was lacking before. So you looked at this run game going into the season, and yeah, it was already going to be physical in nature, the way, and also athletic with the linemen, wide zone. But I mean, you felt like there was going to be more of a presence with Mike McDaniel coming in. But with the Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds combination, neither one is really that much of a physical back. And also, you didn't have it behind them, whether it be in Myles Gaskin, Savon Ahmed, Sony Michel not making the team in the preseason. He would have been the most physical downhill runner, you would have thought. So he wasn't there to provide that presence. But now that it is Mostert and Jeff Wilson, like they've been teammates in San Francisco before, also with different running backs in the fold, whether it be Elijah Mitchell, a number of others. Now this is a great marriage where you have one that is like that physical downhill runner, and then you have Raheem Mostert who can kind of clean up after that, and he hits you with his game-breaking speed. So Jeff Wilson can really wear opponents down as the game goes on, and we saw it early. Then he's in there 4th and 1. They hit him near the first down marker, but he just runs right through and then is driving the next guy, even as he's kind of already close to the ground, and he's just driving with his legs, getting more yardage after that. Another physical run later, he hits an open hole, and then he's looking for contact. He is delivering punishment to the DB at the second level. And that wears opponents down as a game goes on and really opens things up around him. So I think we saw that as the game went on, where that's when the Dolphins then started to dominate as the game continued to go on. And I mean, defenses get tired of having to tackle a physical runner like that. You know, you would see it in the past with so many guys, like in recent history, maybe a Marshawn Lynch, where it takes its toll on the defense. So, and Bradley Chubb, just the number of packages that the Dolphins can come up with. Granted, now they won't have Emmanuel Ogbah, but I mean, it is fearsome for opponents that you have to account for Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Melvin Ingram, and then Andrew Van Ginkel when he comes in. You already are thinking about Christian Wilkins and Jerome Baker, where he's lining up, because he can go inside, outside, and Zach Sealer and where he is and how much of a push he can get. So the inside, outside guys getting to the quarterback. They had 14 quarterback hits against Jacoby Brissett. So that's a phenomenal number. And then just how they're coming in waves. It's not just one guy getting there. It's multiple guys winning their matchup to then all 3 sacks were split, half a sack each. And then even on a couple, you could even say, oh, there was a third guy that was close to getting in there as well. So that's what you really want to see, just coming at you different spots, whether it's both edges, one edge, and then the interior pressure. And that really affects a quarterback in a big way.
And let me ask you something, Furones, about a question that I got on Twitter that I answered in the Q&A that's online at sunsentinel.com, and somebody was asking why the Dolphins don't have a 230, 240-pound back to wear down defenses. And I was saying that, look, this team is aggressive more than it is physical. And what I mean by that is you do have Jeff Wilson to give you that physical presence. But, this team relies on speed, right, with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But you've also got a good offensive system here with this team. And you've got a good passing game with this team, a short passing game. You've got a medium-range passing game. You've got a deep passing game. This is a team that doesn't really need that type of drive you into the dirt physical presence. They just put pressure on you, and it's going to be with the speed. It's going to be with the scheme. It's going to be with the play calling. So I think that, within the things that you want, the ways that you want to wear out a defense or the situations, your 2-minute offense, your 4-minute offense, I think this team is capable of doing it without that old school, big, the Leonard Fournette, the Derrick Henry type of hulking running back. That's what I think, that they're aggressive more than they're, drive you into the ground physical.
Sure, but still, Jeff Wilson does bring a very physical presence, right. Even at what is he, 220 something pounds? Yep. But and he runs more physical than even that shows. So, what a tremendous get for a 5th round pick after as the Dolphins say, the Broncos wanted Chase Edmonds in that deal, and then you end up really on the plus. Chase Edmonds, as much as Mike McDaniel doesn't want to either criticize him or put him down on his way out, he wasn't fitting the same way. And I mean, Chase Edmonds was used to the inside zone scheme from every level of football that he had played before this. So it wasn't really clicking with him. And then now you end up with someone who has been in the wide zone scheme. I mean, comes actually directly from San Francisco and has played under Mike McDaniel there. And we saw how great he was in the games where the 49ers were without Elijah Mitchell and before they acquired Christian McCaffrey. So now you bring him into the fold right away, and it's paid enormous dividends for the Dolphins.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back to the other side of the ball, to the defense side of the ball, and we'll go out to our Twitter question. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but our Twitter question comes to us from Tanis JC, and the question is, who will replace Ogbah? And I would say right off the top, it's not going to be one person. It's initially it's going to be a committee. If they can find that one person, now I don't know if there's anybody sitting around who can give you 9 sacks like Ogbah did, but if they can find somebody, they will. But I think you go away from what you were doing with Ogbah from the standpoint. You've got Bradley Chubb, and so you will do different things now. And so, again, what I expect to be one of the common trios, pass rush trios, is going to be Chubb and Jalen Phillips and Mel Ingram in there together. And then, maybe you put Christian Wilkins in there also. By the way, Christian Wilkins, let's give a shout out to him because of the outstanding season that he's having, both against the run and against the pass. The dude is a worker, and we're seeing results. But, replacing Ogbah, I don't think it's going to be okay, here you are, you replace Ogbah, kind of like you did with Kader Kohu and Byron Jones. You find a different way to attack both against the run and the pass. Is that your thought, or what do you think of Furones?
Yeah, it's interesting because Ogbah is really the only defensive end as listed by his position on the active roster. So now the Dolphins' defensive fronts under Josh Boyer are so versatile and multiple, as he often tells us that it really there's so many different fronts that they put out there. So, if Trey Flowers, for example, was available right now, then he would be one to look at. Now, there is no update on him as far as him coming back from his foot injury. He's not on season-ending IR, so maybe he could come back later on in the season. Maybe the Dolphins look for another replacement from the outside and would have to work him in. Ben Stilley was on the practice squad and then just today was picked up by the Cleveland Browns. So he would have been a candidate to get elevated off the practice squad for at least, or 2 more times, which is what they had available to him. The one previous game that Emmanuel Ogbah had missed, which was the game against the Steelers, Stilley did get the call up for that one and played 9 defensive snaps. So he would have been a candidate, but I guess the Cleveland Browns, in a revenge for losing 39-17, they wanted to make sure, well, all right, you lost Ogbah, and now we're going to take your practice squad defensive lineman that is a candidate to get bumped up to get some snaps in his place. But like you said, a lot of different packages. So already the 3-man front that we were seeing oftentimes to start games, because Emmanuel Ogbah he only had 3 starts. You would still have Raekwon Davis at the nose, and then Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins on either side of him, flanking him. And then you got your linebackers, and then depending on if you're in the nickel or what have you, behind that. But I would say that's kind of your base 3-man line. Obviously, John Jenkins gets in there oftentimes for some snaps for Raekwon Davis. You could mix in whether Wilkins or Sealer are playing inside, outside, 1 technique, even up to the 3 technique outside. They can slide out. So it depends on where you line them up, how far away from the center, and also just those outside linebackers. Then now maybe we'll see some more packages where either a Jalen Phillips or a Bradley Chubb can put their hand in the ground, and then you mix them with Melvin Ingram. You can work Andrew Van Ginkel in there. Jerome Baker is able to go inside and outside. So there's so many different things. It's a multitude of ways that the Dolphins can attack it, even if they don't necessarily bring someone in from the outside. But they haven't announced a corresponding move with putting Emmanuel Ogbah on IR for now. So maybe there is a spot open for someone to dump in from the outside as well.
Yeah, and Furones, before we wrap the show up, because, we like to keep it between 45 and 50 minutes. We don't want to take up too much of people's time. Let me ask you about Jason Sanders. And this was another one that we got on Twitter and that I addressed online on sunsentinel.com today. One thing that I think is interesting about Jason Sanders and this situation, he misses the 2 extra points against Cleveland. He missed the 29-yard field goal attempt against Chicago. And Mike McDaniel explaining that field goal attempt missed against Chicago, said a gust of wind came up. But one thing that I noticed, and Mike McDaniel gave Sanders a vote of confidence yesterday, said there are no plans to audition kickers, but Mike McDaniel kept that positive vibe going, didn't he? He did that. He's done this with Tua. He's done this with everybody. Mike McDaniel does not publicly rip his players. He keeps everything positive. And that's what he's done with Jason Sanders, that, I believe in Jason and he's our guy. We're not auditioning other people. Is that the correct approach to take? Now, I think it is. I think Jason Sanders will come around. We'll see if that happens, but just the approach that the team is taking and that Mike McDaniel has taken, I think has been consistent with what they've done, and I think it's the right approach. Should they be auditioning kickers? Should McDaniel be putting public pressure on Sanders? Would that help the situation at all?
Yeah, see, I think Mike McDaniel's taking the right approach, because even if, let's say, they were to audition kickers this week, still just remain positive to the kicker you have on your team. Just lie to the media. I mean, I don't want to encourage that too much, but yeah, when we ask about it, yeah, just give them your vote of confidence, lie to the media, and then still audition kickers. You could do that. It's fine. But Mike McDaniel's not a liar, though. But it is good on him to just give him a vote of confidence. The bye week comes at a good time for Jason Sanders. Really, I never bought it when Mike McDaniel talked about the gust of wind in Chicago. Sure, it was windy out there, but it's a 29-yard kick, and I mean, I'm no kicker, but I mean, I wouldn't be able to make it. If I tried to kick it, yeah, a slight gust of wind would. But no, I'm not going to say I would make it, because I cannot kick. I can throw a little bit. I can throw and catch a little, but I can't kick. But it's a 29-yard field goal for a professional kicker. Just boot it through. If there's wind, adjust a little bit in the way. I mean, we know from like playing Madden, okay, a wind is coming, you adjust a little bit to the side against it, and then even if it does come, all right, it's going to move it a little bit toward the center. So, and it's 29 yards. It's not that much of a distance for the wind to really factor in and just blow it away. It was shorter than an extra point, really, and there was no problem in Chicago with those extra points. Then there was one when there wasn't a win in Miami, and we saw 2 extra points failed in this game. So at least the bye comes at a good time for him. He can mentally get back into the groove of things, and we'll see how he comes back around on the other side of the bye. If the Dolphins want to audition kickers, then sure, maybe take a look at a couple guys, see what's out there, see what you would have, and you can still do both things. Still give Sanders your vote of confidence for now, and then if he continues to miss and it's going to be an issue down the final stretch and then potentially the playoff run, then yeah, maybe you would want to bring someone else in. But for now, go ahead and just see if he can get out of this funk.
Well, I'll say this, Furones, having it both ways, I think Sanders would find out if they auditioned kickers because it's a small world. Some kicker would, a kicker's agent, the kicking coach, like he would find out, and that would be a bad situation. So while, McDaniel could lie to us, the media, it would be a bad look to be supporting Sanders, and then Sanders finds out, you had kickers in here trying them out. So
be transparent with him, and then. But yeah, I mean, if I'm Mike McDaniel, then yeah, I'd probably still just lie to the media and say, no, we believe in him 100%, even if I didn't believe in him.
Wow. This is precedent setting here. Okay, so and let me ask you one more quick thing. Special teams, are there concerns, do you think? And while we talked about the special teams last week, they did give up the big return on the opening kickoff that led to a touchdown, but Mostert had a couple of good returns. And they snuck Jalen Waddle in there for a kickoff return. That was a touchback. But are there special teams concerns overall?
Well, Perk, what can you tell me about the way they punted in that game?
Nothing.
They did not.
We didn't see Morstead.
Yeah. So when the offense is going that way and you don't need to punt, then whatever. But yeah, I mean, there are still some special teams concerns. The missed extra points, some short kicks being missed. So that's now 3 short kicks over the span of 2 weeks that have failed. And
they've given up a fake punt. If you know,
yeah.
I don't know if that's a big deal. Stuff happens during the season, but it's just something that you make a mental note of.
Yeah, and that was really a gutsy call by Detroit on that side of the field to do. So, yeah, I agree when Danny Crossman explained it, that just percentage-wise, you're not really thinking they would go for it. You're prepared for that fake, but I would agree percentage-wise, you're not thinking they actually will. But, hey, that Detroit team didn't have much to lose, so they went ahead and tried it, and it worked. So give them credit for a gutsy call. And then, yeah, you don't want to give up big returns early on, losing containment, your lanes, your assignments. That's vital in that aspect of the game. When the Dolphins have had to punt, I really like what Morstead has done and the punt coverage. Keon Cross and Justin Bethel, gunning down there. So now Cross, and we have to follow up on his shoulder injury on the other side of the bye week because he is a very key special teams player and also getting in at cornerback as well. So that's one thing to look into with both defensive and special teams impact.
Right, and we did see Crossan in the locker room briefly yesterday. No, sling or anything like that for whatever that's worth. All right, well, let's wrap up with this, Furones. The Dolphins looked really good against Cleveland. We talked about it was as close to a complete game as we've seen this season. Now that they've got Bradley Chubb, now that they've got Jeff Wilson, how close was that Cleveland game to what we can expect to see from this team on a regular basis for the rest of the season? I think it was pretty close.
Yeah, and we were waiting for that kind of performance that the team hits in all aspects of the game, minus special teams, like we just alluded to. But to see everything from Tua being sharp and even able to spread the ball around. Look, we didn't even have big games from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to watch that time. So to still be that dominant with the run game, Tua being as efficient as he was, the defense coming through, both stopping a star running back in Nick Chubb and then also getting after a quarterback. Granted, the Browns weren't really a feared offense in other aspects, but it starts with stopping the run. They were able to do that. Big difference stopping the traditional run game than the quarterback scrambles like we've seen Justin Fields run for a regular season record for a quarterback against the Dolphins. That's something they have to fix going forward. If some mobile quarterbacks, if they run into a Lamar Jackson in the postseason, run into a Josh Allen, which they will have to see later on, who can scramble for yardage as well. And he did in that Week 3 game against the Dolphins, and we saw that. So still have been very solid against the traditional ground game, which I like to see. And then getting after the quarterbacks, I think that will be enhanced going forward with Bradley Chubb, all the packages we mentioned, the way they can come at you in waves and affect quarterbacks. So really, that's very few holes that you're talking about now if they get all those things going at the same time.
Yeah, there's going to be ups and downs, obviously, for the remaining games left here in the season, that they're not going to score 49 and Wilson is not going to rush for 119. But I do think that's the offense that Mike McDaniel brought here. When you look at how they ran the ball, how they threw the ball, 8 receivers catch passes. Tyreek and Jalen Waddle will have bigger games statistically, but I think that was close to the model offensively of what Mike McDaniel brings and wants to see. You flip it over to the defensive side, they're learning that you're not, they're trying to figure out their style right now without Byron Jones, which they've had to deal with all season, and now without Brandon Jones, without Nick Needham, now without Ogbah. You mentioned Trey Flowers. They've had to make adjustments to the style that they wanted to play early in the season, and it's really been a matter of just kind of hunting around and finding out what you can do consistently well. And so I think they're just now coming on that. Chubb is going to help, that there's a certain way that you can get after the passer. There's a certain way that you can defend the pass. The run defense is going to be there. I would say largely unchanged by these injuries, although you do miss Brandon Jones being the 8th man in the box. He was the leading tackler for the team. But yeah, I think the offense showed the model. The defense got very close to showing the model. So I think what we saw Sunday is going to be pretty close to what the Dolphins want to do moving ahead. We'll see if it happens. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Dolphins Deep Dive. As always, thanks for joining us here at noon every Tuesday, sunsentinel.com. That's my boy David Furones. I'm your boy Perk. We will see you here next week.